There's a $2 white powder you can buy at any pharmacy that does what 12 different products at the garden center do, and it does most of them better. It feeds tomatoes. It boosts roses. It greens up yellow lawns. It revives dying houseplants. It fixes the curled yellow leaves on pepper plants. It thickens up bare patches in fruit trees. It even improves the color of hydrangeas and the fragrance of herbs. One single powder, sold for less than $5 a bag at any drugstore in America, replaces $100 of branded fertilizer products on garden center shelves. A retired florist in Oregon used it to rescue a row of rose bushes her late husband had planted 30 years earlier. The leaves were yellowing between the veins, the canes were producing fewer blooms each year, and the local nursery had told her the bushes were past their prime and needed replacement. She mixed 2 tablespoons of the powder into a gallon of water and watered each plant once a week for 3 weeks. By the 4th week, every bush had pushed out new dark green canes, and it was setting more buds than it had in 5 summers combined. Her total cost was under $4. Her neighbor had paid $290 that same spring to have a landscaping service replace 4 old shrubs with new ones from a nursery. The global lawn and garden consumables market is worth over $24 billion in 2025 and projected to climb past $38 billion by the next decade. Scott's Miracle-Gro, Bayer, BASF, and a handful of other chemical companies dominate every shelf in every garden center in North America. The broader gardening market, including tools, pots, seeds, and supplies, is expected to reach $150 billion globally by 2030. The average American household spends between $400 and $700 a year on garden products, services, and replacement plants. Multiply that across 80 million homes with active gardens, and you begin to see the size of the machine that depends on you walking into a garden center every spring, believing you need 15 different bottles for 15 different problems. A single $2 powder that handles half of those problems at once is not a product the garden industry can afford to celebrate. So they buried it inside the bath aisle of the drugstore, next to the cotton balls and the rubbing alcohol, and let generations of homeowners forget what their grandmothers always kept on hand. They didn't bury this powder because it failed. They buried it because a single ingredient that does the work of 12 cannot generate 12 revenue streams. This is the story of the bitter white salt that turned a sleepy English village into a royal spa town, kept Victorian gardens alive through the worst soil in Europe, and quietly outlived every patented fertilizer that has ever tried to replace it. Welcome to Forbidden Gardening. If these stories matter to you, the subscribe button and the bell are how this knowledge survives another generation. Here we dig up what the garden industry quietly buried. Let me take you back to where this story really begins. The summer of 1618 was unusually dry across southern England, and a local cowherd named Henry Wicker was walking across Epsom Common in the county of Surrey, trying to find drinking water for his thirsty cattle. He came upon a small pool of water sitting in what looked like a hollow footprint in the dry earth. His cows refused to drink from it. Wicker bent down, tasted the water himself, and recoiled. The water was bitter, almost metallic, and clearly came from some deep mineral source under the ground. He dug a small square hole around the pool, and the next day returned to find the hole filled to the brim with the same bitter water. Wicker thought he had stumbled onto something dangerous. The local people thought differently. Within months, neighbors discovered that bathing in the water healed cuts and skin sores faster than anything else they had tried. Drinking small amounts cured constipation overnight. By 1640, word of the miraculous spring had reached London, and within 20 years, the village of Epsom was one of the most fashionable spa towns in all of Britain. King Charles II visited regularly. Queen Anne traveled there for treatment. The diarist Samuel Pepys wrote in 1667 that he arrived at Epsom by 8 in the morning to drink the famous water alongside dozens of other visitors. The bitter salt that crystallized when the spring water evaporated was given the name of the village, Epsom salt. By 1755, a Scottish chemist named Joseph Black analyzed the substance in a Glasgow laboratory and identified it as a previously unrecognized compound, magnesium sulfate. He proposed magnesium be classified as a chemical element, which it eventually was. But the real garden discovery happened almost by accident. Victorian gardeners in the late 1800s noticed that plants growing in the chalky soil near the original Epsom spring outperformed identical plants in nearby fields. Roses grew taller, tomatoes set more fruit, cabbages headed up tighter and heavier. By the early 20th century, agricultural extension services across England, Germany, and the United States were quietly recommending Epsom salt to home gardeners as a foliar feed and soil supplement. Then synthetic fertilizers arrived after the Second World War, and the chemical industry had no interest in promoting a $2 product when they could sell you a $30 bottle of branded plant food instead. The knowledge faded into footnotes. Before I go any further, I need to stop and tell you something important. This video is just the first layer of what the garden industry has spent decades burying. I spent months compiling every forgotten gardening technique, every suppressed home remedy, every cheap natural formula into one complete archive. All of it is inside the complete Forbidden Gardening Vault. The exact Epsom salt schedules for tomatoes, roses, peppers, lawns, fruit trees, and houseplants. The vinegar and salt weed killer recipe, the aspirin and milk tomato formula, the lawn tonic recipe your grandfather mixed in his garage, the diatomaceous earth method that ends garden pests without harming bees, the ancient Persian olive irrigation technique that cuts water bills by 70%. Over 12 complete garden guides in one vault, every page built for immediate use this weekend in your own yard. The link is in the description. But stay here, because the science behind this powder explains why a single ingredient does the work of 12. Here's what actually happens when you apply Epsom salt to a struggling plant. Magnesium is the central atom inside every chlorophyll molecule. Without magnesium, a plant literally cannot make chlorophyll, and without chlorophyll, the plant cannot photosynthesize. The most common visible symptom of magnesium deficiency in any plant is intervenal chlorosis, a condition where the tissue between the leaf veins turns yellow, while the veins themselves remain green. If you have ever looked at an old tomato plant or a tired rose bush and seen leaves that look like green-stained glass with yellow panels between the veins, you have seen magnesium deficiency with your own eyes. Epsom salt delivers magnesium in a form that plants can absorb almost instantly, either through the root system when applied to the soil or directly through the leaf surface when applied as a foliar spray. The sulfur half of magnesium sulfate is just as important and almost completely overlooked by the modern fertilizer industry. Sulfur is required for the synthesis of two critical amino acids, cysteine and methionine, and for the production of many plant enzymes. Sulfur deficiency has actually become more common in recent decades because atmospheric sulfur pollution from coal burning has dropped sharply, which means farms and gardens no longer receive the free sulfur deposits they used to get from the air. Modern soils across much of the United States now test low in sulfur. A pinch of Epsom salt restores both magnesium and sulfur in a single application, two essential nutrients that most synthetic fertilizers do not contain at all. If you have made it this far, you already understand more about plant nutrition than most homeowners spending hundreds of dollars on specialty bottles every spring. Subscribe and share this with someone still wandering the aisles of a garden center looking for a separate product for every plant they own. Now stay with me because the money trail behind this suppression is the real story. You cannot patent Epsom salt. The compound has been mined commercially since the 17th century and produced synthetically since the 19th. It is sold in bulk for under 50 cents per pound at industrial supply houses and for $2 to $4 a pound at any pharmacy or grocery store. You cannot build a $24 billion garden products industry on a single product that lasts indefinitely on a shelf and treats an entire backyard for an entire season for under $5. You cannot create 12 separate revenue streams for tomato food, rose food, lawn boost, bloom enhancer, magnesium supplement, foliar spray, leaf greener, fruit tree feed, houseplant rescue, hydrangea booster, herb stimulator, and chlorosis corrector when one ingredient handles all of them. The economic engine of the garden products industry depends on you walking into a store believing you need 15 specialized products. A single ingredient that replaces all of them is a wrecking ball through the entire shelf. I need to be honest with you about the real limits of Epsom salt. It is not a complete fertilizer. It contains no nitrogen, no phosphorus, and no potassium, the three macronutrients that plants need in the largest quantities. If your soil is severely depleted across the board, Epsom salt alone will not save it. And critically, Epsom salt only helps if your plants are actually deficient in magnesium or sulfur. If your soil already contains adequate levels, adding more does nothing useful and can, in extreme overapplication, interfere with calcium and potassium uptake. A simple soil test from your local agricultural extension office costs under $20 and tells you exactly what your soil needs. Use Epsom salt as a targeted supplement, not as a universal cure. Here's exactly how to do it in your own garden. For tomatoes, peppers, and most vegetables, mix 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt into 1 gallon of water and water each plant at the base every 2 weeks during the growing season. For roses, work half a cup of dry Epsom salt into the soil around the base of each bush in early spring, and follow with the same 1 tablespoon per gallon foliar spray when buds first form. For lawns showing yellow patches, dissolve 3 tablespoons in a gallon of water and apply with a Hosen sprayer over 250 square feet. For fruit trees, work 1 cup of Epsom salt into the drip line of mature trees in early spring. For houseplants, dissolve 1 teaspoon in a gallon of water and use it once a month in place of a regular watering. Total cost for an entire season of treatments across a full backyard, roughly $5 to $8 in materials. Compare that to the $200 or more the garden industry wants you to spend on 12 separate bottles for 12 separate problems. A homesteader in Pennsylvania documented her vegetable beds and rose garden online across 3 full summers using only Epsom salt and basic compost. Her before photos showed pale yellow leaves, weak fruit set, and stunted growth. Her after photos from the second summer showed dark green foliage, heavy harvests, and roses blooming twice as thick as the year before. Her total annual garden supplement budget runs under $15. This knowledge did not die because it stopped working. It died because it worked too well across too many plants for too little money to fit inside a $24 billion shelf system that depends on selling you 12 separate bottles. Henry Wicker found the spring 400 years ago. Charles II drank the water. Queen Anne soaked in it. Joseph Black named the chemistry in 1755. Victorian gardeners proved it on roses and tomatoes 100 years before the first synthetic fertilizer was ever invented. And then one generation of homeowners stopped using it because a glossy commercial told them that real plants needed real chemistry from a real brand. The Epsom salt is still in the pharmacy. The chemistry has not changed in 4 centuries. The only thing that changed is who convinced you that you needed 12 products instead of 1. If this vault opened something for you today, subscribe and share this video. The next vault opens soon, and what is inside is going to make every nursery on the corner suddenly very nervous about their best-selling spring product.